Welcome back, friends. So, I'm guessing you were not bored out of your mind for part one of the 4 misconceptions Christians have about Christianity. So, let's jump into the second one. The second misconception is Christians say that Christianity was relatively unified in the first few centuries and only became theologically diverse and fragmented with time. Yeah, right, Christians. Except for science and facts. Can't believe you guys actually believe that stuff.
Christianity was relatively unified in the first few centuries and only became theologically diverse and fragmented with time. The further you go back, the more united Christianity is.
Yeah, I would say the only people who would say that are people who haven't read any sources from early Christianity. It's interesting that just in the New Testament, when you read the letters of Paul, somebody might notice that Paul in virtually every letter is attacking his Christian enemies who say things that he disagrees with. That in Galatians, he thinks that they don't even have salvation, even though they're Christian apostles. And in 2 Corinthians, he makes fun of them. And it's like every letter he's attacking these people. They're not unified at all. Paul has disagreements with Peter on rather what Paul considers to be a major issue. And he publicly calls Peter a hypocrite. When you get into the 2nd and 3rd centuries, we have forms of Christianity that are completely unlike anything that evolved into what we think of as Christianity. We have Christian groups who claim that there's not just one God, the creator, there are 2 gods, literally 2 gods. The God of the Old Testament, literally not the God of Jesus. You have Christians who say there are 36 gods. We know one Christian group, they're Christians. They call themselves Christians. They say they're followers of Jesus, who say there are 365 gods. And they claim that they're following the teachings of the apostles because they have writings that the apostles, Peter, John, James, etc., wrote. So Christianity was hugely diverse in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. The diversity that we know today between, say, Greek Orthodox and Mormons is actually pale by comparison because of what they had in the early centuries.
Okay, so people of the Bart Ehrman type will make these claims that because they found later writings from groups of people who may or may not have claimed to be Christians, and these views say really weird stuff in them, so therefore no one agreed on what Christianity was. Ha! Got you, Christians! Or even Paul wrote about people claiming to be Christians who he disagreed with. So that means there were many forms of Christianity. Try to handle that one. Suck it, Christians. Yeah.
You suck it. Suck it. Suck it, Sean. Suck it. Suck it, Sean. You can all suck it. Suck it.
All right. So this is so painfully lame. And these forms of logic so terrible that I hear sometimes. It just gets so very old. I want to ask, seriously, that argument that you just made makes sense to you. So, because there were people who didn't agree, there was no such thing as a relatively unified belief. I mean, think of the statement you have to disprove here, first of all. Relatively unified. The burden of proof is pretty high in order to disprove relatively unified. That's what they said the misconception was. The word relative. That word has a lot of wiggle room in it. That's kind of the point of the word. However, no matter how bad this argument is, people who want to believe it as a good argument pass it along nonetheless. Moving on from that, let's apply this logic just expressed by Bart today. Let's do a little thought experiment, shall we? Let's say there isn't much left of the United States like that of antiquity, and people are digging in Waco, Texas. And they find the writings of a psycho cult leader named David Koresh. If you're not familiar with him, just go Google it, you'll find it. And those finding these documents in Waco say, well, sure, we have, 5,000 documents from other sites that are all the same belief of Christians, but these new documents show us that there were two main competing Christianities in America. One of David and, the other group. Koresh's group was ultimately destroyed by the other Christianity in some sort of climactic event at Waco, where the other Christian group, came in and defeated David's group and burned them all down. That's how it happened. That, of course, is incorrect and super way off. Compared to the larger Christian population of the United States, David Koresh and his group of cult followers were insignificantly small and were never accepted as reflecting Christian teaching by the vast majority of Christians. Just because some bozo says he's Christian doesn't mean that he is. Would evolutionists say that creationists are also just as valid as we are because they claim to be? Of course, they would not. No one applies this logic to anything else, but when it comes to biblical history, all of a sudden it's like, wow, that makes total sense. What? Listen, do you think it is remotely possible that there would never be people who would come out of a movement that would twist it for their own gain or purposes? Of course there would be, but that doesn't mean there wasn't an original and mainstream belief that existed. From the evidence we have, we can make a reasonable conclusion that there was a relatively unified belief of Christianity. And remember, that's what the claim was, relatively. So pretty easy to defend. And that over time, it did become more fragmented and diverse. We have the history on this. This is not a misconception, but is what the evidence shows. Has there been cults in the past? Yeah. And there are cults of Christianity today. Yeah. Will there be in the future? Yeah. Doesn't mean there isn't a relatively unified belief as to what Christianity believes. Try again. I've heard these kinds of claims and many others like it that Bart's kind of doing here so many times. And they take a tiny little piece of something that someone has found somewhere. And they take that little piece of evidence or that little clue or something, and they take it from the world of maybe it could be to, well, it's not only just a maybe, it's possible. And then they move it from possible to, maybe it's kind of probable. And then they force it and stuff it into, this is certainly true. Stephen M. Stigler once said, the more you torture the data, the more likely they are to confess. But confessions obtained under duress may not be admissible in the court of scientific opinion. All right, well, that is all for this episode, and we will do a part 3 over the last 2 misconceptions, so stay tuned for that. Thank you to my Patreon supporters. We are blessed to have you, and you keep the lights on here, so thank you. If you're new to this channel and you like this episode, or this series, go ahead and subscribe, visit our page on Facebook, and check out our other episodes as we address different issues in our world and bring you the truth of Christ in a post-truth culture. Grace and peace, brothers and sisters.